Tyler Perry gives a heartfelt speech at the Oscars this week that you probably didn't watch and gets immediately attacked because it wasn't woke enough. Hey guys, my name is Jason Wesley and this is not a podcast. Hollywood's biggest night was also its smallest night, ironically enough. The 93rd Academy Awards were held this past week, and if you're like most Americans, as well as currently working actors, you thought, oh wow, really? I guess that is right. It was called the worst show ever. First off, it was clear that nobody knew where to look. Imagine me doing this episode of Not a Podcast, and I'm like, hey guys, this is not a podcast. Where's the camera? My name is Jason Wesley, and this is not a podcast. And also, everyone was reminded that they needed to wear their mask, but only when the cameras weren't rolling. So it's kind of like a show.
Just like on a movie set, when we're rolling, masks off. And when we're not rolling, masks on. All right, that's how we do it. Okay.
And what was up with the DJ mixing non-licensed music and actually scratching as people were walking down to accept the award?
Donald Bramberg, production design, and Jan Pascal, set decoration.
You know it's bad when people at the awards were on their cell phone as people were walking past them accepting an award. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger couldn't watch it.
It was so boring. I just couldn't watch it anymore because there was so much talent there on the stage, but it was so boring. How can you make this with all this talent so boring?
The show was heavily criticized on social media for being boring.
Hurry, turn it off now, go to the chopper. And at one point, this lady accepts the award and gives it to her wolf and howls.
We give this one to our wolf.
And Anthony Hopkins, he won the final award and he wasn't even there to accept it.
Anthony Hopkins, the father. The Academy congratulates Anthony Hopkins and accepts the Oscar on his behalf. Thank you.
The Oscars viewership has been on the decline in recent years since they've become more woke, and they haven't had a host for 3 years in a row since they tried to have Kevin Hart as a host, but the woke social justice warriors found some tweets from over 10 years ago that he had already apologized for, and they tried to cancel him and tried to cancel the Oscars. Oscar ratings plunged nearly 60% as young people especially appear to tune out. Even Deadline reported, Oscar viewership rises to 10.4 million in final numbers, remains least watched and lowest rated Academy Awards ever. So let's take a look at the viewership numbers. The Oscars in 2020 had 23.6 million viewers, a 31% dip from 2019. It was held in February, long before the COVID lockdowns that happened in March. And in 2019, it came in about 3 million viewers behind the previous low in 2018. And if you remember back to 2016, the whole Oscars So White fiasco where Jada Pinkett Smith was upset her husband Will Smith didn't have a nomination for an Oscar, and she made a video about black people removing resources to put only in black communities to acknowledge black people.
And now I think that it's our responsibility now to make the change. Maybe it is time that we pull back our resources and we put them back into our communities, into our programs, and we make programs for ourselves that acknowledge us in ways that we see fit, that are just as good as the so-called mainstream ones.
Will even said that if he had been nominated, that Jada still would have done the video.
Was upset that you didn't receive a nomination this year.
There's probably a part of that in there, but for Jada, had I been nominated and no other people of color were, she would have made the video anyway. We'd still be here having this conversation.
And Chris Rock mentioned her when he was hosting that year as well.
Jada boycotting the Oscars is like me boycotting Rihanna's panties. I wasn't invited.
It's interesting that the industry of wokeness and liberalism would also be the industry of exclusion and racism. According to a New York Times article, the Center for Responsive Politics reports that individuals and firms in television, movie, and music industries gave $84 million in campaign contributions during the 2016 election cycle, with 80% going to Democrats. Statistics from the American Community Survey back up the common sense assumption that acting is primarily a blue state occupation. 57% of working actors live in California or New York. As a professional actor that's worked in the industry for a number of years with some amazing people, the ones that are excluded the most are not excluded because of their race or their sex, but because of their political leaning. I have friends of mine that are conservative leaning actors that can't speak out openly because of the fear of getting fired. I've lived in the South for a number of years and have experienced more hate and racism in Democrat-ran liberal cities like Chicago, New York, Los Angeles than I ever have living in states that actually had legalized slavery. Now, if you think that no one is telling the story that you want to tell, then write your own story. That's what actors like Sylvester Stallone did when he wrote Rocky.
I wrote it quickly. I write quickly, 3.5 days.
3.5 days?
But here's the caveat. I'd say 90% was terrible.
You were not going to sell it to anybody unless you got to star in it.
Yeah, there is that moment where you go, am I ever going to find anything even close as again?
What did you do? I mean, you had no money and people were offering you hundreds of thousands of dollars, right?
Yeah.
And you were turning it down.
Everything, you know. It went up to about $360,000, which is crazy.
And you had nothing then?
I had to sell my dog. I couldn't afford dog food.
You really sold your dog?
Well, absolutely. $50 at a 7-Eleven. Wow. I had to buy him back afterwards for $1,500. But well worth it. Yeah, and then I put him in the movie. He's my friend. He's my buddy. I loved him.
Other actors like Mindy Kaling wrote The Mindy Project.
When you first sat down and said, I wanted to write my own show, what did you want to do?
Well, I was trained to be a comedy writer from Greg Daniels at The Office. So I learned how to write jokes and this, the style of, writing hard jokes for things from him, Mike Schur, BJ Novak, Paul Lieberstein, who were all there the first season. But it wasn't necessarily my style. Like, I learned to love The Office and its kind of unglamorousness. Like, that's the truth of it. What was beautiful about the show is how truthful it was and how unglamorous it was. But I love wearing 9 bracelets and wearing sequins and kissing guys and living in New York City and having disposable income. Like, that's my personality. And OBGYN was because my mother was an OBGYN, and she was a very fun, glamorous person who had great stories, and great, really fun stories. And I knew it being raised by her, I knew how unpredictable the hours were, and it just seemed like a fun environment. And I get to interact a lot with women, so it seemed like that would be fun.
Yeah, yeah.
And what's crazy is that the film that was considered the black film, Marvel's The Black Panther, that won 3 Academy Awards in 2019, that the original Black Panther character was created by 2 white Jews in the 60s. The superhero was the brainchild of writer Stan Lee and artist Jack Kirby, who already were veterans of the comic book industry when they started working together at Marvel at the dawn of the 1960s. The first comic book series they produced in tandem was the Fantastic Four in 1961, but they would go on to create a slew of beloved superhero characters, from the Hulk to Iron Man to the X-Men. Now, I really don't care who wrote or created it. I think it was a great movie and a great story anyway, no matter who wrote it. But back to the 2021 Oscars. So I've noticed that the Oscars used to nominate movies that people had seen, that were pretty popular, that a lot of people liked, and now it's like they nominate movies that nobody's watched and movies that they want you to go watch. Before, I used to watch the Oscars and could guess which film would get an Oscar. Now I watch it and I'm like, I've only heard of one of these movies. So instead of using the Dolby Theater this year, the Oscars decided to move it to Union Station in LA, which has a high homelessness population surrounding it. According to the Post Millennial, Los Angeles kicked out the homeless so that Hollywood celebrities could attend the Oscars.
They were coming harassing us, coming 3 or 4 times a day saying, with posters saying we had to move, you gotta move, you gotta move, you gotta move, you gotta move, so we didn't have a choice.
He goes by the name DJ.
My tent was by the pole on the end, the curves right here. And it was filled with people, but now everybody's gone.
He was living on the 101 overpass 1 block away from Union Station when suddenly he was told he had to move.
They came to us about a week ago and said that we had to move by Friday, today, 6 p.m., because they were trying to clean it up for the Oscars. And they told us that if we didn't move, they were going to just demolish our stuff. If you have warrants, to take you to jail.
Los Angeles City Council member Kevin De Leon said that the homeless residents were not forced to relocate in a statement, while the 93rd Academy Awards are being held at Union Station this year. And despite irresponsible rumors, no unhoused residents are being forced to relocate. Since being sworn in, my office has been painstakingly working to house those experiencing homelessness throughout my district, and we were able to offer housing options to unhoused residents in the vicinity of Union Station. However, as the 93rd Academy Awards graced television screens across America, there were no tents or homeless people to be found. But once the homeless voluntarily cleared out and they erected their walls with security and cops on every corner, the 93rd Academy Awards commenced. And shout out to everyone that got recognized for their work and their performances, especially Trayvon Free. They gave a shout out to police officers with the acceptance of his speech for a short film.
Today, the police will kill 3 people. And tomorrow, the police will kill 3 people. And the day after that, the police will kill 3 people, because on average, the police in America every day kill 3 people, which amounts to about 1,000 people a year. And those people happen to disproportionately be black people.
How uplifting and encouraging, and not ignorant or mischaracterized at all. So Tyler Perry gets the Jean Hersholt Humanitarian Award, and he gave a story of remembrance of helping the homeless woman, and he told stories of his mom and the struggles that she overcame, and then started speaking about hate and meeting in the middle. Watch this.
And I remember being a little boy and coming home, and she was at home, like, what are you doing at home? You're supposed to be at work. She was in tears that day. She said there was a bomb threat, and she couldn't believe that someone wanted to blow up this place where she worked, where she took care of all these toddlers. It was the Jewish Community Center. My mother taught me to refuse hate. She taught me to refuse blanket judgment. And in this time, and with all of the internet and social media and algorithms and everything that wants us to think a certain way, the 24-hour news cycle, it is my hope that all of us would teach our kids, and not only to remember, just refuse hate. Don't hate anybody. I refuse to hate someone because they are Mexican, or because they are black or white, or LGBTQ. I refuse to hate someone because they are a police officer. I refuse to hate someone because they are Asian. I would hope that we would refuse hate. And I want to take this Jean Hersholt Humanitarian Award and dedicate it to anyone who wants to stand in the middle, no matter what's around the walls. Stand in the middle, because that's where healing happens. That's where conversation happens. That's where change happens. It happens in the middle. So anyone who wants to meet me in the middle, to refuse hate, to refuse blanket judgment, and to help lift someone's feet off the ground, this one is for you too. God bless you, and thank you, Academy. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And even after such a welcoming, inclusive speech about refusing hate and meeting in the middle, the blue check marks and others were on the ready to attack. Police officers are not an oppressed group. No one hates the police because of undue prejudice. It's only because they engage in state-sanctioned violence against all of the groups Tyler Perry said we shouldn't hate. Hashtag Oscars. Tyler Perry slipping in police officer between LGBTQ and Asian. See, because in Woketopia, there's no redemption, because redemption is inherently Christian. It reminds us of Jesus and how we've all been redeemed by his blood. But we all know what BLM and leftists think about Jesus. Once you're cast out, you can't do enough to redeem yourself. You just hope that people forget, since the attention span of most people nowadays is about the length of a goldfish. But even as the Woketopians refused to meet in the middle, Hugh Jackman, also known as Wolverine, took Tyler Perry up on his challenge to meet in the middle.
Watching the video clip from the Oscars last night of Tyler Perry receiving the Jean Hersholt Humanitarian Award, that one in particular really touched me, because when Tyler speaks of stepping into the middle, I was like literally yelling at the TV, like, I'll meet you in the middle, Tyler. And I'm telling you now on social, thank you for your inspiration. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for your leadership. I'm literally, hopefully, going to meet you in the middle. Let's break bread, which I will bake. And let's talk about how we can get stuff done, because, dude, it's astonishing what you're doing, and you're an inspiration.
Hey, Tyler Perry, I'm also willing to meet you in the middle.